Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for episode 2 of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, I'm joined by the $1 million man, WWE Hall of Famer and legend, Ted DiBiase. Ted, how you feeling after your first week as a podcaster?
I tell you what, I like it. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, it was kind of like when we started talking. I mean, things started just jumping in my head. Things, like I remember things that normally I would go, oh gosh, it's kind of like when I start talking wrestling, I start remembering things. Like if I'm with, and anytime I'm in a group of wrestlers, somebody will say something and go, hey, you remember when this happened or that happened? And then somebody goes, oh yeah. And it just hits like it just reverberates off the walls. And so I'm going to hope that this continues to, reverberate.
I'm thinking so, man. Certainly we got plenty of notes, and we're gonna have plenty of notes every single week to cover for each of our topics. And yeah, hey, I know how it goes. Wrestling kind of gets in your blood once you start talking again. I think next thing you know, Ted, you're gonna be trying to do Ted's last match. What do you think?
Oh well, no. In the words of the $1 million man, everybody's got a price, but I'll be 70 years old in January.
My goodness.
And people have told me, they said, well, golly, Ted, you don't look 70.
You don't.
And I feel pretty good, but I don't know if I feel good enough to get back in that ring and have a match. Now I did that thing with Cameron Grimes, right?
Yep.
And then I think we talked about that, like they were going to have somebody kind of catch me and lay me down easy. And I said, no, you're not. I'm going to take a pump just like I always did. To show you young yipper snappers how it works. So, and I did.
And hey, look, I think the right circumstances, a tag team, who knows? Yeah. Maybe somebody could name the right price and we could see one last run for the $1 million man. Well, hey, I will say this. You do look like $1 million. You don't look like you're about to be 70. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Tell me if the secret is beer, please.
Unfortunately, it's not, I did my share of beer drinking.
Well, look, before we get into our topic this week, which is WrestleMania 4, at the top of the show, I just wanted to remind everybody that you can get this podcast early and commercial-free with video when you go to and join Premier Plus at premierstreamingnetwork.com. That's Premier, Premier, streamingnetwork.com. It's your destination for Everybody's Got a Pod and exclusive videos and your favorite sports and entertainment events from around the world. If you're a wrestling fan, you've just got to check this out. Seriously, just get over there and have a look. And I think you're going to like what you see. It's an incredible value. So just join up with Premier Plus, and you can get this podcast early and commercial free. Come on, you can't beat that. Also wanted to mention, I've got this right here. Mr. DiBiase was kind enough to send this to me. We've got a free giveaway going over on our YouTube channel. All you've got to do is subscribe, and you're eligible to win. I just showed you that signed Funko Pop. We've also got 11 signed autographed cards from the $1 million man himself. You can be one of our winners. It's free. Just go over to youtube.com/everybody's got a pod, subscribe, maybe hit the notifications bell if you want to, and you are automatically eligible. This is going to run the entire month of May. So starting in June, we're going to select our winners, and then we'll probably do another one at some point. So get over there, subscribe. You will not regret it. Ted, enough of that. Let's get into our subject this week. We're talking, of course, about WrestleMania 4. And this week, we're starting out with Meltzer going out of his way to put you over again. Following a house show match with you and Virgil facing Hogan and Bigelow, we have this in the February 15th Observer. Without question, DiBiase is the single most perfect opponent for Hogan in this country as far as working. He has this knack for getting the most out of Hogan. So, Ted, we discussed it last week on the podcast. Hogan wasn't necessarily considered the best ring technician out there, but you were at the top of your game. Did you feel like there was some kind of a trick to getting the best out of Hogan, or what was your method when you climb into the ring with him?
Not really. I never had any problem with the Hulkster, and it was kind of like, it's, I guess, in terms of wrestling psychology, how do you as a heel, work with a big guy? And that was the deal. It's kind of like, Hulk Hogan is not a guy who should ever be doing hip tosses and reverse arm locks and on the mat wrestling. I mean, that's not what big guys do. And so, I try to tailor my match with him and anybody else that size. It's kind of like, it's like I look at it from a realistic view. If I get in the ring with this guy and we lock up, and then I would have him I said, push me off, and he'd push me off, and man, I'd take a bump and get back up to my feet and go, whoa, and then circle around and make it obvious to the people that I'm thinking. I'm thinking like, what do I have to do to get this guy, or I would, I'd grab a headlock on him, and he'd actually push me off of a headlock or pick me up and kind of toss me away. And anyway, it was just the psychology of it. But I never had any trouble with the Hulkster in terms of what he could do and what he couldn't do. And you was anybody that I wrestled, I always looked at that. I mean, I would, and this is old school, I would study guys. I would go and watch guys that I knew I was about to have, matches with. If I hadn't wrestled them. And I saw what they did well, and I saw what they didn't do so well. And I would incorporate all the things that I knew they could do well into the match. And I would try to stay away from things that, either I thought they shouldn't be doing as a big guy or weren't or didn't do very well. And so that was just the way that's old school psychology, and it works. So,
man, I want our listeners to think about that for a second, because I don't suppose, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I would not guess that there were a lot of guys back in your era who were sitting down and watching film of their opponents. It was kind of like this it seems like a chaotic, like, okay, you get to TV, hey, you're working with this guy, you go out there and you work with the guy, and next thing you know, you're in a program with him, and really, like, everybody's trying to get to the next town. But here you are, you're studying film on the guy. Did a lot of people do that?
Well, it wasn't so much me studying film. I mean, if there was a show on, I would watch. But I mean, in the arenas and at the TVs or wherever I could, when I knew I was going to, that I was going in that direction, that I'd be in the ring with him, and I would just study. I'd go and watch the matches. It's kind of like, it's funny. I always did that. I mean, it was just an old school thing. I would always go out and watch the match right before my match. And people said, why? I said, so I wouldn't repeat what they did. If they had, and they were, like, just for a small example, like, one guy in the match was, like working the arm, like, he's got his arm and he's doing these things that involve the arm and or he worked a headlock or he worked the leg. Well, I would not work those body parts. I would go somewhere else. I would try to make my match, unique,
different, stand out. And man, no wonder Meltzer is putting you over as being such a great wrestler. Like, you're kind of going above and beyond here. That's really fascinating. We talked about Hogan here a second ago, and I wanted to ask, Would you're paired up with Randy Savage, and all's well that ends well because you guys had put on a hell of a match, and as you mentioned, it's the first time you got to work with him, and it was great. But on the surface, when you're finding out you're working with Savage as opposed to being, in the main event of WrestleMania against Hogan, would there have been any disappointment?
Uh, hmm. Well, WrestleMania 4 actually ended up being Savage,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the main event because we ended up being the last two guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's when we had we had that match, and at WrestleMania 4, Savage wins, becomes the world champion, and I go on that run. But the thing is, Hogan was involved. I mean, a lot of the matches that I had, what it was, it was a lot of Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan against Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I wasn't. Again, I look at it. It's kind of like, maybe I sound like the $1 Million Man now. I look at it from the financial view.
Right.
What is going to make me the most money? Would a run with the world title make me a little more money? It might have, but it would have been very short lived. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
As a heel, now if I was a baby face, if I was a Randy Savage, and actually I'm the guy who turned Randy Savage babyface,
Right.
because up until that time, he was a bad guy. And so then, when he beat me and he became champ, then he became a babyface, and that would be different. But as a heel, I study my opponents, and that's what it's about.
Fascinating and a cool perspective. I think that a lot of people on the surface would have said like, man, it's Hogan was the biggest star in the industry, and I would have liked to have worked with him in the main event. However, just from a financial standpoint, as you pointed out, it's like, look, you're the heel in the main event at WrestleMania, so either way, you're walking away with probably a pretty nice paycheck. So
Absolutely.
yeah, really, really nothing to complain about.
And
The-
now the only money money lost, obviously, if you're the world champion, I guess there's some extra bucks that come along with being that. But like I said before, I wouldn't have been that champion very long, because again, Vince McMahon had made wrestling family entertainment, and I started getting it. It's like,
Mhm.
and once I started to understand what he was doing, I said, this is a stroke of genius, really. He's taken wrestling, which was pretty much a, like, you know, you weren't going to see a lot of, polo shirts and khaki pants at the wrestling matches. It was, like it was, like that, it wasn't that type of deal. And what, what do you call it? Wrestling was blue collar crowd form of entertainment
Yes.
up until, Vince McMahon taking it and targeting children with it, and making action figures and all that stuff. And of course, if you have a good guys, you got to have your bad guys too for them to battle. And so I got that, and I understood that had I won the world title, I was going to keep that very long, because the kids, the market now that the Vince is targeting, they want the champion to be their hero.
A cool perspective, like a businessman's perspective on it. You're thinking with your head instead of your heart, and I think that that's awesome and pretty rare, really, when it comes to
Yeah,
wrestling.
well, you got to get your ego out of it. That's it's a business, and I'm in the business to make money. So
Well, perfectly said, like the $1 Million Man. The February 22nd Observer is the first time that Dave mentioned the tournament concept for WrestleMania. I've heard some people say over the years that they love tournaments, while others say they're pointless because, you get to the final couple matches or rounds, and that's when you can really pay attention. What do you think of the tournament concept overall?
I really don't know. I've never really thought that hard about it. But a tournament could be exciting, if you put the right people against each other,
Mm-hmm.
and as a fan, you're watching that and you're going, okay, and because the fans do that, they go, here's what I think is going to happen. This guy's going to beat this guy. This guy's going to beat that guy. It's going to end up these two guys, and then you watch to see if what you think is what really happens. In that way, it's like I think it's pretty cool, but it wouldn't be something I would do all the time. But in this instance, it fit.
Well, I did want to ask too, when it comes to this tournament concept, all of a sudden, Ted, you're looking at working 3 times in one night to do this tournament.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you feel about it? In your head, are you already thinking like, yeah, I'm probably going to get a larger payday because I'm putting in extra work?
Well, I don't know if I thought of it that way, but I mean, I just had to gear up for it. I mean, here's what I said to a lot of people. I go, it's really cool for a lot of guys that are in the business that, worked hard to get there and everything. And they said, I got to wrestle at WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but not very many of them can say, I got to wrestle 3 times in one WrestleMania. So
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
mean, it's incredible, and it speaks a lot to how Vince viewed you, being able to kind of carry the
yeah,
load like that.
yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think if anybody else has ever done 3. Maybe Daniel Bryan. I can't remember. WrestleMania 30. I don't remember if he worked 2 or 3, but man, it's remarkable to be sure. In the February 29th Observer, Meltzer makes mention that while Vince has all hands on deck promoting WrestleMania 4, Jim Crockett Promotions just announced a TV special that will run at the same time. This would, of course, be the first Clash of the Champions featuring Flair and Sting on top in what would be a classic bout. So, Ted, here you are. You're in the biggest wrestling promotion in the world, and you're about to main event the biggest show of the year. And now JCP is about to steal a big chunk of the audience with a free offering to counter WWF's pay-per-view. Would you have been disappointed hearing the news, or did you even hear about it at the time?
I don't. In my opinion, it didn't affect us that much. I mean, the WWF at the time was so strong. I mean, I wasn't concerned about it. I mean, actually, I was glad they were doing that, and because here's the thing, competition is always good for business,
Yes.
and not just and competition is also always good for the wrestlers,
Mm-hmm.
because if you've got competition and somebody's nipping your heels, then the guy in charge is also going to pay you a little bit better to get the best out of you. So, in other words, and if you get paid better, obviously that's the best way to make sure that guy doesn't leave you.
Yes.
So anyway, it was good for the guy. It was good for talent.
Well, I mean, we look at the Monday Night Wars, and business was as hot as it's ever been because of the competition.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. That's a great example.
right.
Yeah.
And but Vince is here actively trying to eliminate competition himself. Famously in the fall of '87, Vince would create the Survivor Series concept to counter JCP's Starrcade, and then again in January of '88, JCP is running a bunkhouse stampede, and Vince created the Royal Rumble and put it on TV to distract from them. So he's going as far as issuing ultimatums to cable providers, saying that if they carried JCP's pay-per-views, that he would not allow them to carry WrestleMania. So I mean, Ted, you grew up in the business, and you cut your teeth in the territories. And here's, your new boss is essentially trying to create a monopoly in professional wrestling. What did you think of that on the surface?
I don't know. I was like, I got it. I never talked a whole lot about it, but I always felt like, well, I'm glad we're having a war.
Mm-hmm.
I said, because competition is always it's always good for business, and it's good for everybody's business.
For sure.
In other words, whoever the underdog is in that, more power to him too, because now fans are going to have a choice, and it's going to make both companies work harder to earn that dollar. And hey, like what made America great? Competition.
That's it.
It's like there wasn't nobody had a monopoly. Of course, people have tried to make monopolies. Maybe that's what Vince was trying to do, but in reality, having competition was good for him, I think.
Yeah, and it's look, if it could have stayed with punch counter punch back and forth between the two, I think long term success was inevitable. But after a while, JCP just couldn't counter punch anymore.
Yeah,
Vince
yeah.
just outdid them in every way, shape, and form. So I mentioned Flair a moment ago, and Meltzer had this to say at around this time. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to hear your take on it. On his good nights, Ted may be the best worker in the US, but for night after night consistency, he can't touch Flair. So that's just Dave's opinion. But you and Flair are about to be on opposing main events. So I'm curious, how would you have compared yourself to the Nature Boy as a worker at this time?
I would compare myself with him. I mean, I would say I'm on an
Hmm.
equal level with him. I mean, I would not, I understood that, like when you're, you know, like I said in the last podcast, when you're the champion, especially when it was the NWA world title, the NWA was like there was, the WWF was basically, well, until Vince made the move and went national, and he told everybody, I mean, he went around to all those promotions and said, "Here's what I'm about to do. I'm giving you an opportunity to join me, and if you don't want to join me, that's okay. But just I'm coming." He told the whole wrestling world.
Hmm.
Uh, but I mean, you're the NWA World Champion, and that champion would go to all the territories and wrestle basically the top baby faces in those territories. And his job was to make that guy.
Yes.
It's like he doesn't lose the belt, but he makes that guy look like the champion. And and you got to know what to do. And and every guy you work with is going to have a different style. And just so you know, my name was in that hat.
Yes.
My name was in the hat. It was me, Dusty, and Flair. And Dusty and Flair both in it of being the champion, for the NWA, and I didn't because I left and went to New York.
Right. I don't know how many
So,
of our listeners know
I
that.
don't know that I would agree with who said that about me.
Dave Meltzer, and I don't agree either.
Yeah.
As somebody who has watched both of your work from this era, I honestly believe, and I'm going to sound biased because I'm your co-host here, but I honestly believe that you were the best worker on the face of the planet at this time. Your character tends to kind of overshadow everything. Everybody just remembers your laugh and the suits and the $1 million belt and everything. Guys, I would urge you to go back and watch Ted in 1988 and watch the kind of work that he was doing. He was incredible. You were putting in incredible work, and yeah, so I don't agree with it either. I know
And
that Flair is
and
often revered, but no, you were right
oh,
there.
and hey, listen, Rick and I are good friends, and he was definitely, yeah. I mean, he had it, no doubt. And but even and here's the other thing, but even if you watch Flair enough, there are certain things Flair does in every match, and it's kind of like I can see him coming. That at some point he's going to do this thing, and he's going to take a face bump, and he goes to the top rope, and you're no, then somebody's going to slam him off of it. And, there's just things that I see him do that I saw him do in all of his matches. But
Hmm.
again, but no, I mean, for consistency and being the guy, and I tell you what, being the world champion was tough because your match almost every night was an hour long.
Right.
You were going to go an hour, and unless you beat somebody, you were going to go an hour with whoever that guy was. So you had to be in great shape to do it, and Rick did it well. I have
And to his
no.
credit, when you're going from territory to territory, as you mentioned, you're not working with Steamboat every night.
No,
sometimes you're coming into territories and it's just some dude who happens to be the best guy there,
yeah,
who is, who couldn't lace your boots.
right,
So
right.
yeah, it's kudos to Flair, but man, it's, again, folks, go and watch Ted in '88. He was phenomenal. So as we inch closer to WrestleMania, here's another tidbit, March 3rd Observer, and I'd like to hear your take on it. Let me preface this by saying that Meltzer is kind of, he baby faces you. He goes heel on this a little bit. So I'm interested to hear how you feel by the end of it. A few weeks back, virtually everyone inside was saying that Ted DiBiase would win, which makes sense since it sets up Titan's 8/29 pay-per-view card in which Ted can drop the title to Hogan. However, even though I fully agree that DiBiase is the best wrestler in the WWF and probably the best at this stage of his career of anyone who has worked for Titan in 15 years, he can't draw as champion. That may be immaterial since Titan can't draw for months after WrestleMania anyway, and at certain times of the year, really can only draw when Hogan is on the card. So there may be no answer to Titan's summer drawing problems for this year anyway. So he continues, DiBiase didn't draw in his 1 week dry run as champion in California, traditionally Titan's hottest corner of the U.S., aside from the Northeast. And his main event last Monday at the Garden with Bam Bam Bigelow drew the smallest MSG crowd in years. Still, nobody but Hogan himself is going to sell out buildings at this summer. So again, just Meltzer's opinion.
But the thing about that is that nobody recognized me as the real champion.
Right.
You understand?
Yes.
I mean, that's the deal. I mean, I have the belt, but I didn't have the belt because I beat Hogan. I had the belt because I bought it from Andre, as the storyline went. So that, you can't forget about that when you're looking at this.
We have to put it into context.
Yeah, you got to put it into context. Like nobody saw me as the real world champion. Now, if I had gone out there and had a match, like a single match with Hogan, and we go neck and neck, and we put in the time, and somehow I win, then I think then I think I would have had that crowd
for sure.
But just to say that, based on what he's saying, let's say I couldn't draw, that's ridiculous.
Agree. It's kind of like an elementary school way to look at it, like just very basic, bland, without taking the full thing into context. I do want to ask, and he mentioned it here, and I think that you and I touched on it lightly last week. But you would wear the belt at a handful of untelevised events in some big cities, and you're introduced by the ring announcer as the WWF champion. Yeah. And years later, Vince would do the same thing with Luger as well, to get a gauge for how the audience would react to seeing him with the belt. Yeah. I know we all know how it turned out. You wound up being the $1 million champion. It was way better. But at this time, did you feel like Vince was trying to assess you as his champion during these appearances?
I never really thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew what we were doing, and I knew that they were gonna, what was coming. Like, well, you didn't really win the belt, so we're gonna have this tournament.
Right. Well, and just to put things into further context with the Meltzer remarks, he relies on secondhand information for almost everything. Where somebody's telling him, "Hey, here's what the reaction was like at this house." So it's again, he's not putting it into context. He's relying on secondhand information. So I want to hear your recollection of it. Do you remember what kind of reactions you were getting from the crowd when you came out with the belt? A lot of heat?
Oh yeah, of course, a lot of heat. Because everybody knew. It's kind of like you didn't win it.
Right.
It's like my whole thing in the character of the $1 Million Man is I'm going to prove to you that I can buy anything, including the world title. And so Andre's going to beat Hogan. I'm going to be the champion because he's going to sell me the title. That was the story, and that's what we ran with. And again, like I said, we ended up in a lot of. Now, when it got to be Hogan and Savage against Andre and Ted, that was big. That was huge. Again, it's like. Regardless of what Meltzer says. And again, it's always a vote. And the WWF took off and became this superpower that, you know, I mean, basically all of the territories went away. But there's a whole lot of wrestlers and there were a whole lot of territories. And when it came down to who's going to be the next NWA World Heavyweight Champion, there were only three names in the hat.
Yep.
DiBiase, Dusty Rhodes, and Ric Flair. And Dusty and Rick both ended up having that. I didn't because I went to New York.
But you, in all likelihood, would have. I know that
exactly.
I know that that's how they viewed you, and yeah, I think that that's kind of an underrated part of this whole story, and it's something we're gonna discuss eventually in long form whenever we talk about your arrival in the WWF in '87. But before he was going to the WWF, Ted had an offer from JCP, and I believe that you had agreed, kind of in principle on the surface, to join them, and then Vince all of a sudden said, "Hey, I've got this really incredible gimmick, and I want to talk to you about it." And next thing you know, you're headed off to New York. But I've heard Flair say it. I've heard a lot of people say it. Not only would you have been champion, but Flair himself has even said, like, I wanted Ted to be in the Four Horsemen.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, the other thing that was going on at that time is I had this tremendous deal in Japan.
Yes.
I mean, I was Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody were probably two of the biggest gaijin foreign wrestlers ever in Japan.
Yep.
I mean, they were huge. And then Brody jumped ship and went from All Japan to New Japan, and Stan needed a new partner, and he came to me. And he says, Ted, he says, yeah, you want the job? I said, hell yeah, let's do it. You know, and I put on the chaps and the vest and the whole deal. I don't know if anybody's seen that. I don't know if you can find a picture of that. But but I did that. And of course, that was going on. And I can remember sitting in the back of the Houston Coliseum talking to Bruce Pritchard, you know, and I was getting ready to go to Japan. And Bruce said, well, he says, I'm gonna fly up to New York, you know, and see about getting a job up there next week. And I just said, hey, Bruce, I said, throw my name out. They know me up there. I was there once, you know, back, you know, it was back when Vince Sr. was still the boss, but they know me now. See if they're interested. I remember coming back to the hotel in Tokyo from one of the trips, and at the front desk, I had a message, and it said, call Bruce Pritchard ASAP. And so I called Bruce, and he said, not only is he interested, he's extremely interested. And he said, so whatever you do. And the other thing that happened on that trip, when I went to Japan, was when I got back to Mid-South, Bill Watts had sold his territory to Crockett.
Right.
And so, and then that's the other thing I was told. He says, do not do a job for anybody, you know, because you're, you know, until this thing is settled. And so, you know, I had my allegiance was to Bill Watts, and he because he saw it coming. That's how smart Bill was. He said, I didn't have the wherewithal or the money to fight Vince. It was just too big. And so he says, I got out and I sold out. But that was the deal. It's like, whatever you do not sign a contract with Jim Crockett or that organization until you have a chance to talk to Vince McMahon. And the rest is history.
Man, I cannot wait to talk about the final days of the UWF or Mid-South or whatever you want to call it, and your entry into the WWF. Before we move on, though, I did want to mention something that you let's hammer home this point. Ted is in Japan replacing Bruiser Brody, and so like Bruiser Brody was a massive star. So is Stan Hansen. And so for Ted to get that spot, I mean, you want to talk about a vote of confidence for you to become Stan Hansen's tag team partner? Absolutely huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. I mean, and I was, and I, you know, I'd been making annual trips to Japan. I'd make one trip to Japan a year. And, and then, but when this thing came up, and when Stan approached me about it, he said, you know, look, I need a new partner, and you know, I want to know if you'd be interested. I said, are you serious? I mean, here's the deal. If I'd have taken that and kept it, I could have been like Stan. I could have just gone to Japan 5 or 6 times a year, and I would have made big money. I mean, I was uh, okay back then. Now this what year was that? 80 what?
87.
Okay, I was making $1,000 a night in Japan.
That is big money. And I mean, that's big money now for most
Yeah,
households. 1987. Holy smokes.
yeah. And so, but the other thing that I had to consider was just that. It's like if I'm going to remain uh, a name, or if I'm going to be relevant in my own country, then I have no choice but to go to work for Vince.
Yep.
And like I said, when I got that message from Pritchard, he said, "Man, he's really interested in you." And I said, "Great." And so uh, I went back and waited for the call and took the trip to New York, and the rest is history.
Man, you got the gimmick that Vince has often said that he would have taken himself if he had been able to be a professional wrestler.
I said it. I told everybody. I said, if Vince could have been a character in his own show, he'd have been me.
Yeah.
He would have been the $1 Million Man.
Just awesome. And I mean, what a cool position for you to be in. And here you are in another great position. It's again, for full context, you are not even a full year into your run with the WWF, and you're about to headline WrestleMania in Atlantic City. You're set for one of the biggest nights of your career, Ted. And before we get into it, though, I do want to ask, had you seen WrestleMania 3, that huge spectacle at the Silverdome?
I didn't see it. I didn't. I've never gone back and watched the whole show. I've seen segments of it, but I remember. I still remember. I'm not sure what town I was in. I was in Mid-South somewhere, but I still remember opening my my hotel room door, and there was a newspaper. And I picked that newspaper up. It says WWF sets indoor world attendance record. 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome. And that's when I said, I said it right then. I said, if I'm going to remain relative in the business, then I'm going to have to go to work for Vince.
So I mean, incredible, Ted. You get this newspaper and it says 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome, and then a year later, here you are, and you yourself are at WrestleMania. However, there's a bit of a difference. It was at the Pontiac Silverdome for WrestleMania 3, but now it's at the Trump Plaza, which seats less than 20,000 people.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I was like, I was kind of like, really? We're gonna have WrestleMania here? I was preparing myself for, oh gosh, man, we're gonna really blow this thing out.
But, right, massive.
Not only was WrestleMania 4 there, WrestleMania 5 wasn't it?
Yeah, WrestleMania 5 was there too.
Yeah. And that's the first time I met Donald Trump.
So you mentioned it, and that's one of our fan questions this week. But let's just hit it right now. Any interactions with Donald Trump? What do you remember?
Not really. I don't know how long that Vince and he knew each other, or maybe it was because of considering having the match there that he got aligned with Trump. But actually, no. I met the guy, and he was very cordial and everything, and I said, I just jokingly said, obviously you are the real version of me. And he got a chuckle out of that. So, but no, it was good.
Well, look, folks, political preferences aside, we won't get into all that. However, I mean, you met, shook hands with, talked with a future president of the United States. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. No matter how you slice it, really cool. Yeah. Well, there's another factor to consider here when it comes to the casino, and that's what's called a casino buy. The casino bought a bunch of seats in the arena to give away to high rollers, including premium seats that were at ringside. So the result is an audience that's composed of a lot of people that weren't necessarily wrestling fans. And so, I mean, you worked the second match that night with our mutual friend, Jim Duggan. Did you notice that the crowd was a little less enthusiastic, or what was your feel for it?
I didn't notice any difference. I really didn't. You know, I didn't. I really didn't notice any difference at all.
Well, let me say, I went back and watched the event, and for your matches, certainly the main event, the crowd is absolutely electric. It really is. However, Jake and I covered WrestleMania 4 on a recent episode of our podcast, The Snake Pit, and during his match, they were dead. And they were kind of booing. Now, look, I think Jake shoulders a little bit of the blame for that, but he shouldn't. It's not his fault because there's also 16 matches on this card. So
Well, yeah, and you know, and again, you know, taking nothing away from Raven Jake. Jake's one of the greatest workers of all time.
yes,
And but again, the story, you know, going into WrestleMania, you know, didn't involve him. The big story going into WrestleMania involved me. The fact that, you know, the whole deal with Andre getting the belt and presenting it to me, and then they take it away from me, and you know, the whole tournament deal. You know, so you know, I would say that is one of the reasons that I got a lot more response, because I was one of the key players of WrestleMania 4.
yes, and also you're not just the hottest heel in the WWF. You could make an argument that you were the hottest heel in the entire wrestling industry. So, I mean, you are going to get reactions when you're coming out because people wanted to see you lose. But here, you know, you're just kind of out wrestling, out thinking people on the way to this, you know, through this tournament on, and you know, to claim this title.
Yeah,
So it was a cool story. So it's hard to blame fans for getting so into it.
yeah,
JCP did wind up hurting you guys a little bit. The buy rate was down from the year prior, pretty significantly. And one cable TV operator said something to the effect of that idiot McMahon devalued his own attraction by not putting Hulk Hogan in the main event. So I don't really know about how accurate that statement was. But I do want to ask you, you know, knowing that you won't be standing across from Hogan in the main event, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, not really all that disappointed, right? Like, because you're like, hey, look, you know, it's about the money. It's not necessarily about the
yeah.
spectacle.
See, and here's the thing. See, and I know that was, you heard that from a fan's perspective.
Like a cable TV operator, some
Oh
dude
yeah.
who's
Oh,
not in the business.
but
Yeah,
from a wrestler's perspective, when you know where we're going, it made all the sense in the world.
right.
You know, because you know, when WrestleMania is over, and you know, and Randy's the champion now, and then the way things then started to turn out, and you know, the tag matches all over the country, Savage and Hogan, and you know, me and Andre, and basically, I really think, I don't know how long had Randy been there.
Gosh, I want to say that Randy showed up in the company in either 84 or 85.
Yeah, but you know, was he? But this was really the jump for him, wasn't it?
It was. It was. This is what launched him
Yeah,
into from the mid card into the main event, so to speak.
right. And again, that that's significant. So, you know, the rub I had with Hogan, and then obviously now the rub that I'm having with Savage, and I'm going everywhere. And I'm either main eventing and having rematches with Savage, or I'm having tag team matches, and my partners got the eighth wonder of the world, Andre the Giant. Talk about a rub, you know,
My God.
that you know, all of that helped elevate my persona. I
Right.
believe.
And
Yeah,
so huge stars, and Savage was kind of starting to climb the mountain, but pretty soon he's going to have that Slim Jim deal, and all of a sudden his voice is going to be this kind of really iconic thing that's associated with pro wrestling. So it's, I mean, yeah, to say that you're getting the rub, certainly an understatement. And you're giving the rub to, again, our buddy Hacksaw in the first match. Meltzer suggested that possibly he was working hurt here. What do you remember about working with Jim?
oh gosh, I've had so many matches with Jim Duggan, and Jim's the best. I mean, he is a great. I mean, to this day, a great friend. You know, I have been concerned about his health, and I think he's doing much better.
He is.
Uh, and but Duggan and I, we had so much fun in Mid-South. It was just, I don't know. There's a lot
So
of story. There's a lot of stories there, but he's just always bigger than life, and ended up being, and when he first started, I mean, I was there, and oh my
mhm.
gosh, it was, you talk about, rough around the edges. Here's a guy that had played, you know, played college football, and he had a little bit of pro, right?
Yeah, played for the
Uh,
Falcons
yeah,
briefly.
and then comes into wrestling, and it's kind of like, uh, every now and then I'd have to remind him, Jim, it's a work. It's a work.
So look, I don't want to talk about it now because we are
Yeah.
going to cover it on an episode. But man, folks, go out of your way to see the tuxedo match between Ted and Duggan because it is something else. We are going to do a full episode on that sometime soon. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, it's great. And look, I love Jim Duggan, such a great person, and he's about to get a big push here in the WWF. He won the first Royal Rumble a couple months earlier, and he's going to knock Andre the Giant out on TV here shortly after this. Hogan's about to leave. He's going to go to Hollywood, I think, for a few months, or he's having a kid. It was something to that effect, where Hogan's going to be gone here after WrestleMania for a while. Did you see potential in Jim being able to maybe carry the banner as a top babyface in the company?
I didn't see it coming, but I mean, yeah, I mean, Jim. I mean, it's all about, it's Jim is not a great technical wrestler. I mean, people talk about being a great technician in the ring and all that stuff too. Well, okay, thank you very much. But Jim is bigger than life in
Hmm.
terms of charisma. I mean, you can have all that you need, and if you don't have charisma, you got nothing.
Right.
Jim Duggan had charisma, coming out his backside. Just bigger than life, and in person as well.
Hey, a quick aside. Did you hear about the home intruder at Jim's house that Jim handled?
Uh, yeah, yes, I did. You know, that guy, whoever he was, picked the wrong house.
I don't care how old Jim Duggan is. I don't care if he's just waking up from a nap. Like, give whatever the circumstances are. You don't want to break into that house.
Oh no,
Hilarious. So next you come out for Hogan versus Andre in a match that would end in a double elimination and give you the bye headed into the semifinal round. But before we get to the semifinal, you face Don Morocco with Billy Graham at his side. Your match with Duggan was just over 5 minutes, and it's the same case here with this one. I don't really see us talking about Don Morocco very often on this podcast. What did you think of him?
You know what? I had, and that was one of the few times I ever worked with Don, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it was, I mean, yeah, he was good. He's a good guy. I mean, or he wouldn't have been there.
A perfect perspective. If he didn't belong there, he would not have been there.
He
And yeah,
wouldn't
I
have been
mean,
there. Yeah.
he was a big jacked up guy. He had Billy Graham as his second, who's a huge star. So really kind of a cool thing for you to get to experience. All right, we've arrived at the main event. Bob Uecker is back alongside Vanna White to do the ring introductions. Did you have any interaction with these folks, or were you just too damn busy that day?
No, I just met them and said hello. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, when you're about to go into the biggest match of your career, I don't see you, going around
Yeah.
socializing.
No. I mean, I had no time for any socializing. I mean, it's like 3 matches, man. Let me tell you. That's why I tell everybody. I said, "Hey, kid, so you wrestled in WrestleMania?" I said, "Yeah, congratulations. Have you wrestled 3 times in one WrestleMania?"
Talk to me when you do it
Who
3
else can you?
times.
Who else do you know that's done that? Not too many.
Well, we've got the final 2 minutes of your final match that evening against Randy Savage. It's our only clip this week. Let's check it out.
Suplex coming up. He nailed him with it. 1, 2, low. Came out the back door.
Well, Macho's got a lot of resilience. He's still kicking out.
Andre complaining to the referee about the count.
Remember, this match is no time limit. It'll go till there's a winner.
Absolutely. Scoop up by DiBiase slam.
Going to the outside, very high. DiBiase is going to the top. Macho Man beat him. Oh, he caught him. Beautiful slam. Look at Savage going to the outside. He's up there on the top. He's going for the elbow. The flying elbow now. He missed it. DiBiase out of there. Macho went too quick for that elbow. He thought he could end it quick. Maybe that's what he has to do. He may not have enough in him. DiBiase going for the sleeper hold. There it is. He's got it on. But right near the ropes is the Macho Man. Oh, look out. Here comes the Hulkster. Oh. Oh, he clobbered $1 million man. Down he went. The referee did not see it. That's terrible, Monsoon. I can't believe Hogan would stoop to that level. DiBiase is out cold. Savage looking around, doesn't know. Now he's going to the outside. I cannot believe Hogan would stoop to that. Oh! A flying elbow. Hooks the leg. It's over. We have a new champion. It's bedlam here. It's pandemonium. A tainted victory, though, Monsoon.
And undisputed World Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Champion, Randy Macho Man Savage.
The Macho Man, Randy Savage. The new champion of the World Wrestling Federation.
So there it was.
That was awesome. That was the beginning of one of the best runs I ever had in my life.
It's such a cool moment. A cool moment for Randy. Cool moment for you. It's the main event. Who cares who wins and or loses? It's this awesome moment. You're putting over Savage for what's about to be a big run. And as you said, you're about to start a hell of a run yourself.
Yes.
Man, it was awesome. I don't know about you though, Ted. The Ultimate Babyface just cheated to win. There, Hulk Hogan used a chair, which it's funny. A lot of fans pointed out over the years, like, man, Hogan kind of cheated a lot. Like he would like rake people's backs and rake their eyes and hit them with chairs and stuff. I don't know. It's just funny because he's like the Superman babyface type. So
like a heel,
right? So it's the era of huge guys, and I've heard a lot of people say over the years that Savage, he's skinny. He wasn't this big old jacked up guy. What did you think of him as the new flag bearer for the company?
I thought he was great. Again, is professional wrestling. It's not, you got to look at everything. It's kind of like, and Vince, and that's the other thing is Vince liked big guys. I mean, Andre, Hogan, Vince always liked big, well-built guys, and Savage wasn't, he was well-built, but he wasn't a giant,
lean,
but he had everything else, and it was kind of like I respected his work immensely, and again, he's another guy like me who grew up in the business, whose father was a wrestler, and that's something else that he and I had in common. And so, the same psychology of wrestling we shared, and that was evident in our match. So
it was cool, man. You guys had that kind of kinship as both, a perspective that not a lot of people get to have, grew up in the business, grew up watching it and experiencing it. So really cool. Also, both legitimate great athletes. He was a great baseball player. You're a hell of a football player. So your relationship with Randy overall, pretty good?
Good. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I always got along with Macho Man.
Now, we've heard over the years that maybe he could sometimes be a little possessive when it came to Liz. Did you ever have any experiences there?
I never had any. Well, I mean, how would you feel? It's kind of like, you're married to this beautiful girl, and she's obviously they had to have their own place to dress all the time. And all these guys were, he was, I would say, yeah, Randy was a little possessive and but as long as, I never saw anything come from that. Nothing.
I've kind of heard that it's overblown narrative. People would say like he would lock her in a closet. To me, it sounds more like she would get her own dressing room and he would stand outside of it to make sure nobody would go inside and look at her.
Yeah. And that's what anybody would do.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Jake and I say on our podcast all the time that wrestling back in those days was kind of like a pirate ship, and they always say, "Don't bring your wife on the pirate ship,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, right.
And his wife is there, so
Yeah,
yeah, that would probably make anybody feel a little bit on edge.
right.
Overall, Ted, walking back to the dressing room, how did you feel like everything came off?
I was happy. I was happy. I was relieved. Because here's it's kind of like a year earlier. I'm going, man. I need to be working there. I had no idea that I would main event the next WrestleMania, and to have that much responsibility, three matches, and for it to turn out the way it did, I was very happy and extremely relieved. So it was kind of, it's like, man, it's been great, but man, am I glad this is over. Yeah, the pressure's off for a little while. So
Huge, man. Huge
yeah.
night. Biggest night of your career, would you say?
uh, One of them for sure. Yeah, one of them for sure. That'd be hard to say.
Yeah,
But
it's,
yeah, but
off the top of your head, gosh, after 20 years in the business, I'm sure it's hard to just narrow it down to one particular night, right?
well, and I of course, to say that, okay, you main evented a WrestleMania, and I think I main evented two. Uh, Me and IRS, had a tag team match against Hogan, and was it Beefcake?
That's right. Yes,
And I can't remember, was that WrestleMania 9?
it was at
Yeah,
in Vegas.
in Vegas. Yeah, and that wasn't to me, that wasn't as big a match. And maybe it's because it was a tag, but yeah, that would be another highlight. Obviously, anytime you're in a main event at WrestleMania, it's significant.
Right, big night, featured spot. It's who can feel bad about that. So Ted, we're running over. I do want to ask one fan question though. Again, follow us over at Ted DiBiase Pod on all of our social media platforms. You can get your questions in, and hopefully we'll be able to address as many as we possibly can here moving forward. Peter D asks, you faced Hacksaw, Morocco, then Savage. All three had different styles. Was it hard to adapt to three matches against three styles in one night?
Not really, not really, because that's that's what a pro wrestler does. Anytime. And it's like that's why I would watch people. I would go out and watch people who I hadn't wrestled before. I
Mhm.
would watch their matches, and I would take note of what I thought they did well and what they didn't do well, and I would try to keep what they didn't do so well out of the match, and just highlight their strengths. And as a professional, whether I was babyface or a heel, and that's just that's the way I was taught, and from that's old school, and so yeah, I tried to keep doing that.
Well, we're going to try to keep doing great episodes here with Everybody's Got a Pod. We'll be back next week for another episode. But in the meantime, again, we'd love to have you follow us on social media. It's at Ted DiBiase Pod on all social media platforms. Also, follow Ted at MDM Ted DiBiase on all his social media. Follow me at Marcus P. D'Angelo on Twitter. And follow Premier Streaming Network at Watch on Premier on Twitter and at Premier Streaming Network on Instagram and Facebook. Again, if you'd like to get this podcast on video with no commercials and get access to a ton of sports, entertainment, and other shows, get over to premierstreamingnetwork.com, sign up for Premier Plus, and I can guarantee you won't regret it. A reminder, please go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/at Everybody's Got a Pod. We've got this awesome stuff that we're giving away, and we're going to continue to give stuff away. So sign up now, and you will reap the benefits later. I am certain of it. Ted, another really fun episode, man. I'm looking forward to another one next week.
Me too. And gang, always remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
We'll catch you guys next week right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.